One of the highlights of this year's Melbourne International Film Festival is a documentary called The Age of Rage, the Australian Punk Revolution. And it's my great pleasure to be speaking to the director of The Age of Rage, Jennifer Ross. Jennifer, welcome to Movie Metropolis.
Thank you, Peter.
Such an intricately collected documentary about the punk movement in Australia. Tell me about the process. How did you get funding and the ability to make this feature documentary?
For the first 7 years, I just funded it myself. I was working on it sporadically for about the first 3 years. And then, in about 2019, 2018, I was lucky enough to get a private investor. And so the funds that he and a few other people donated were channeled through the Documentary Australia Foundation. So, yeah, I was just very lucky in the sense that I could finish the film properly because I had no idea how I was going to finish it. And yeah, I was lucky that I was able to do that.
Well done on that. That's as always, it takes a few years to get these things done. What is it about the punk movement or punk revolution in Australia that attracted you to make a film about it?
I grew up going to punk shows when I was a teenager, and I just, on the 50th anniversary of punk, it was like really clear, although I had already started my documentary, it was really clear that there was no representation of Australian punk culture, and there usually never is. If people talk about punk, they talk about British and American culture. So I just wanted to create a document of that time, growing up in Australia and being involved in punk and going to see punk bands and spending time with like-minded people. Yeah, and just all of the cultural and the social and the political and the musical aspects of punk in Australia.
Okay.
So that was, that was the 1980s that I sort of got into it. And that's because my brother was a drummer in a punk band and they would practice in his bedroom. So, yeah, that's how I got interested in it.
Very good, very good. And it's great to have an Australian documentation about that that period. First of all, tell me about the people you've interviewed, because it's such a comprehensive range of people that you have collected to talk about this period of Australian music and culture.
I was really lucky to meet all the people that I met, but it started with me connecting with old friends. And thank goodness for social media, because I don't think the film would have been possible if Facebook didn't exist. So that's how I connected with people originally. And after a while, people would contact me and say, I feel I have something to contribute to the film, or I would, get a recommendation to speak to somebody. And that's how it snowballed into 120 interviews over about a 10-year period.
Wow. And that was all shot by you? Were you the sole camera operator, etc.?
Not the sole camera operator. I did most of it because I think I got a better interview if there was just me in the room. It was just a bit more of an intimate atmosphere. But sometimes I had help from other people. And there was one person who was going over to Perth, Anthony Ashbrennan, and he filmed an interview in Perth for me before I was able to get there. So I had no idea that I would make it to Perth or Hobart or, Brisbane or any of those cities. So I knew I was able to get to Adelaide, Sydney and Melbourne, just budget-wise,
Yeah.
So, yeah, initially when he did that, that was great. And that interview features in the film quite a lot.
Uh-huh. Yes, very, very, very interesting. So tell me about the collection of clips and archival footage and photos and so on. It's an incredible array of footage. How easy was it to find and collect all that for your film?
Well, the footage itself, which is separate to the photos, I imagine you're asking specifically about the footage, was donated by some people who had Super 8 cameras or mini DV cameras. And people would contact me and say, I've got all of this archival footage that I pretty much have never looked at. And so they would come over and we'd go through it, and I would just digitize every single item that they had. And so that was a win-win because they had their film, in a digital format, and I had access to footage that, had never seen the light of day, that was relevant, and really, yeah, it was really exciting because through that as well, I learned about different aspects of punk culture that sort of didn't exist when I was going to see punk bands. So there was a period in the 2000s where kids used to just go to abandoned homes and have gigs there, which I don't remember happening when I was seeing punk bands. They were more squats, so they weren't abandoned. They were inhabited by squatters. But yeah, so yeah, and there was footage of kids walking to the houses and outside various cafes in Smith Street, and yeah, there was just so much interesting footage to go through.
There is, and in fact, it's so interesting how the whole underground and punk movement sort of diversified into issues of squatting, women's issues, Indigenous, and so on. It's and skinheads who are part of that sort of process as well. It's amazing how much there is to document.
Yes, I think it helps that I was there and I did understand the different elements. It wasn't like for myself, I was unearthing elements that I didn't know existed. I knew all of these elements were there. And so that made it easier to explore them in the interviews. But what's sort of interesting, I guess, is that possibly the general public wouldn't know about those aspects of punk culture. And so I feel that it's I guess just a gift to be able to share that with people. And so people know it's not just about fashion and sensationalist media and music and an up yours attitude. It's pretty varied and pretty layered, I think. And there are lots of different people involved, so you've got a lot of different types of responses to the culture and the surroundings.
Yes, yes. No, you've really documented that well, and it's so interesting that it's obviously from a personal perspective as well, with your own knowledge. The other thing that intrigued me about The Age of Rage is the use of animation, and I thought that was a really a terrific addition to your documentary.
Yeah, I really love the animation. I'm lucky that I just saw a post from the animator on Facebook saying I'm looking for a gig.
Yeah.
So I contacted her and she was just absolutely perfect. I love the style that she did. And I also had a graphic designer who created drawings that the animator then animated. So yeah, that was great. And yeah, and also a separate illustrator for the poster and the artwork in general. So there were 3 artists involved. Yeah. Sorry, what were you asking?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I basically just let her do her own thing, really. When I say let her, it was obviously discussion and around refining what she'd done, but what she came up with, I really loved.
Yes. No, it fits in well. It's so well integrated, and always good to see the music of Dale Cornelius.
Yes, I just love the score, especially when he's got score under the animations as well. And yeah, I just love the way his score interplays with the punk songs. And I always knew I wanted composed music and not just punk music, because I wanted the film to go beyond a typical punk film, I guess. Yeah, I wanted it to speak to other people, because I think the issues are actually universal and can transcend, the punk community, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. No, again, that fits so well. I'm quite intrigued. What was it? Were there any particular reasons that the punk movement naturally reached its end?
Uh, I think, well, it hasn't really ended. The people I've interviewed are older, but there are, as far as punk music, that's still in existence. And Rebellion Festival in England has just finished, and that attracts thousands and thousands of people every year. So punk itself hasn't ended, but I think the issues that people were facing when I was young they're not there anymore, unless, of course, the threat of nuclear war is there still. That's possible. But punk hasn't really ended at all. It's just, and especially with Facebook, I mean, yeah, people are, and when I say Facebook, I mean social media in general, but Facebook is great for communities, and there are lots of punk communities and people that connect on Facebook and tell each other about gigs. It's just presented in a different way. Fanzines are online instead of handed out at gigs, and, all of that sort of thing. So, yeah, it's funny how people assume it's ended.
No, I just got that impression, but yeah, you're quite right. It's metamorphosed into something else and into other sorts of dimensions and social media and so on. So no, that's fair comment. So it's great to see your film is screening as part of the Melbourne International Film Festival. You must be thrilled to be selected.
Yes, it was on my bucket list. So, yes, tick, tick, tick. I'm very pleased that the first two screenings sold out quickly, and that they added another screening, because I just had a feeling, given that it's my hometown and many people I interviewed live here, I just had a feeling there might be quite a bit of interest in seeing the film. And yeah, so I'm also glad that it had its world premiere at Sheffield Dockfest, and that it could, other people from other places could see it as well. So it's been good. But that's what I was aiming for. And so when I was making the film, I guess I was taking into consideration ways for the film to translate, and so that it would be screened at various festivals and not just punk music festivals.
Yeah, excellent. So well done on that. So tell me, how else will the film be rolled out after MIFF? Because I think it deserves some sort of cinema screenings.
Yes, it's although it hasn't been announced yet, it is going to be screening in other cities in Australia at various festivals and overseas as well. And we might end up having some more screenings as well as the festival screenings, because I still have people asking me if I'm going to have more screenings because they didn't get tickets. So yeah, every day I get messages from people asking if I'm going to screen it anywhere else, or how can they get tickets. So yeah, I definitely think that's on the cards. And yeah, beyond that, I'm not sure about distribution wise what's going to happen, but I imagine it'll be streaming and on DVD as well. But I think it's just great if people are in the cinema and they can see it together.
Yeah. Okay. Very good to hear that, and hopefully it will find an even larger audience. I must ask you, Jennifer, tell me about the editing process, because that's always the fun bit in making a documentary. You have so much footage, so much to try and portray. How do you decide what stays in the final version of the film and what has to go?
Are you talking about the archival footage or the interviews?
Well, the whole documentary in terms of balancing it all out.
After about 6 years of interviewing people, the story revealed itself. There seemed to be a thread in the types of people that were attracted to the film and wanted to be interviewed, and also the themes that arose from the interviews, the thread that tied all of those interviews together. So I started with that story, and what I tried to think about was what makes Australian punk different to punk from other places. And Australia, I guess you wouldn't say it was, had a lot of political upheaval as such in the 70s and 80s, but there was a lot of isolation and loneliness for young people and a lack of community. And those people, especially in isolated places like Rockhampton or the mining towns in northern Queensland, they were looking to find, people to connect with. So, so just finding that sort of, starting with that idea as the story and then sort of morphing into the bigger story once they do connect as a community overall. And then, obviously you'd have one person say something and another person say something similar, and they would all be on the assembly. And I think the first assembly might have been around 4 hours, and then slowly whittling it down to, and that's really hard because I know a lot of the people as well. So I had another editor, Peter Pilley, and he did some great work at making decisions about who was going to stay, and but they all had to be justified. It wasn't just like, I don't like that person, because that's not really that relevant. It's more about what they bring to the story and the expression or how they say a sentence. And then of course the archival footage has to support that, and where there isn't enough archival footage, say when people are telling a personal story, then that's when the animation comes in, or all the photos. But I'm just lucky that I had enough footage to cover various stories, and some of it comes from the National Film and Sound Archive. A lot of it comes from, television stations, ABC, Channel 7, Channel 9. So, it was sourced from many, many places.
What a process. It's and well done on the way you put it together.
I could have gone into more detail.
There could be a sequel, The Age of Rage 2.
Yes, or a book even. I'm thinking a book could be good. I've got lots of interviews where I could, put it in a book, and we'll put, the similar stories in a book. And maybe I'll do that, because I think it'd be nice to just do it a little bit differently for the next one. But I certainly have the material.
It certainly appears that you do. So that's fantastic, Jennifer. So, Jennifer, what's next for you? Are you working on another film?
Not yet. When I went to Sheffield, I realised how little time, because after Sheffield I got to have a bit of a break and went to Paris and London, and I realised that I'd had so little time to think about any other ideas, or what could potentially work as my next film. And everyone says, oh, you must have your next project, and I'm thinking, I have no clue what I'm doing next. But then having that little bit of space made me, just sort of, I got a bit inspired, and I thought about a few different stories. So nothing definitive yet, but just there are ideas that I can ponder while I upload files for film festivals and other assets. And so it's exciting. I'm very thrilled to have completed the film after the long journey, and I'm very pleased to be able to screen at festivals that are highly regarded. So it's great.
It is great, and well done on that. And last question, Jennifer, I love asking filmmakers, have you seen anything else lately that has impressed you?
Yes. I watch about 300 films a year, so
Ooh, wow.
I can say yes. I would say Kids, What Are They Doing Now is a really great film. Do you know that documentary?
No.
Remember that 1995 film Kids? I'm pretty sure the director is Larry King.
Oh, yes,
And it was sort
Kids.
of like,
Sorry, yes, yes.
yeah. So this is 25, 30 years later, and interviewing the people that were involved in that film.
Ah,
And it's quite compelling, and it's really good because the interviewees are really good at delivering, but it's all heartfelt. And then at some point in the film, there's a twist which you're not expecting, and it's like, yes. So that's why that film's good, because you think it's going to be one thing and it turns out that it's another, and then it reverts back to being the good documentary that it is. And the other one that I saw recently is Volcano Man. I think about a guy, a photographer, I think his name's Richard Crawley. And that's a beautifully told story, and it's an interplay behind camera, in front of a camera, with a father and his filmmaker son, who is making the film, directing the film, and behind the camera. So it's just really, really well executed.
Congratulations on The Age of Rage, the Australian Punk Revolution, screening at the Melbourne International Film Festival. And it's been my great pleasure to be speaking to the director of the film, Jennifer Ross. Jennifer, thanks so much for talking with me.